MIDI channel 1 offset. So for each of the 16 MIDI channels, you can either have an offset of 0 or 1. There are some devices that you'll control that always start with a preset of 1, and then there are some devices that start with a preset of 0. So if you want to sync program change messages that you're programming in the Liquid Foot for devices that start with preset 1, just go to the MIDI channel that you want to program and change that to a 1. And if I hit next, I'm sorry, you have to save it, 16, select rather, S4, select, will then go to MIDI channel 2, 3, 4, and so on. Okay, that's how you do that. Global IA mode. If you want all your IA switches, all 64 of them, to only behave in a global manner, meaning ignoring what the presets have defined for each of the IA switches, then, then you would set this to on. By default, it's off. Show red as off. IA switches have 3 states. They could be green, which means on. They could be red, which means that the IA switch has a purpose for this preset, but it's in an off state. And then you have a dark state, which means it's a visual indicator that this IA switch doesn't have a function in the preset and it's off. Now, if you don't like all the lights on, you don't like red and green and dark, and you just want green and dark, then you can show all the red states as just off, which means the LED just won't light at all. It will still behave as a red state, and we'll define that later why that's important, but it just won't show it visually. So you have the parameter to turn that on and off. Tap tempo CC. Hopefully your MIDI equipment has a programmable way to enter a CC number for tap tempo. In the global settings, this is where you define what your CC number is for tap tempo. Again, it's a number, so you can advance by 10, subtract by 10, and then scroll up from there or down to get to your number much faster. So it's between 0 and 127. So that's where we enter that. Block off IAs. If we have an IA switch that's in an off state, not a red state, but an off state, whether we visually see it or not, if we turn block off IAs, if we turn that feature on, then by pressing this in live mode, in a preset mode, it will not trigger the IA switches, it will block it. So it assumes you stepped on it by accident. And that can come, some people like that, some don't. By default it's off, which means if you step on it, it'll turn green and it'll turn that IA switch on for the moment. Guitar tuner source. If you have a piece of equipment plugged into the Liquid Junior that delivers tuner information like the Liquid Tracks, the TCG Major, or the Fractal Axe effects, then select the tuner source so the Liquid Foot knows what to look for, and then you can visualize the tuner on the LCD here. MIDI through configuration. Your settings are either on or off. By default it's off. There are 2 ports on the Liquid Junior. There's a MIDI in and a MIDI out. If you turn this feature on, then all data coming through MIDI in will also go out the MIDI out. So we sometimes call that MIDI through. And so it's a loop. It comes in and goes right out, in, out, in, out. If you shut it off, then data coming in will just stay in and it won't go back out right away. So there are times when you're going to want to turn MIDI through on, and there are times when you're going to not want it on. So that's how you would do that. Menu hold IA switch number 2. Very interesting. If you just tap the menu key, you go into the asterisk first and then menu mode. If you hold the menu key for 2 seconds, which means the tempo light, you'll see it flash red twice, then you can have it automatically trigger an IA switch. And so here we can go from 1 to 64. There are 64 IA switches. So let's say we programmed IA switch 64 to trigger the guitar tuner. So if I leave it 64, which I will, and I'll save it, then when I hold the menu key for 2 seconds or 2 blinks of the tempo light, it will trigger the on messages of IA64, in which case we'll program it to do a tuner. The menu key could also be held for 3 seconds or 3 blinks of the red light as you're holding it. And when that happens, you can trigger another IA switch, maybe a 64 as well. So no matter how long you hold it, it pulls a tuner up, or you can fire off another command. Okay, so that's what that is. IA switch hold. By default, this is off, and that means when you're in a normal operating mode, if you press an IA switch, it automatically triggers either the on or off messages depending on what state it's in. Having said that, you can set IA switch hold to 1 second mode, and in 1 second mode you can press the button as normal and it'll behave as normal, or you can press and hold it, and again you'll see the tempo light blink once, and when you let go, it'll, instead of firing in this case IA switch S1, it'll fire IA switch S17, which is page number 1, or the second page of IA switches when you're looking at the Liquid Foot editor. And if you put it into 1 and 2 second mode, then if you hold it for 1 second or 1 blink, it'll trigger S17. If you hold it for 2 light blinks or 2 seconds, it'll trigger the second page, or third page rather, which would be S34. So you actually can do quite a bit with the IA switches just by either pressing it normally or pressing and holding. So you have your option. That's what that switch does. And then we cycle right back to the first parameter of the global menu. To get out of the global menu, or any menu, just press the menu button once, brings you to the choice, and press it again and you're in normal operating mode.